Hello, Megyn Kelly. I want you to understand that the Puff Daddy case is involved with the Iran negotiations. For example, roles with the military, criminally foreign influence with World Trade Center predicate acts through administrations. The intelligence agency has been showing falsified transcripts and the equivalent to presidents, including as World Trade Center attack roles, and cover-ups where they're pretending that they're legitimate concerns about, legitimate nuclear threats. But they could have stacked means that we all would agree because we all have sickly distinctly the same impositions upon us, but we also have them sickly non-distinctly. And not only has that not been addressed, even though it's against us all, we could use that for make agreements and means to them out of nowhere. To have all this time we could never have found. We never found. Plus, there are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw readings of religions and of the sciences, principles, that the names of the people of the sciences have stayed collusion / sulfide rules with. Differences, racketeering worse than war crimes, with readings of statutes recorded by police involved with retired police chiefs from Wethersfield and a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, a former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, which evolved from the Organized Crime Control Act. No, which I wouldn't call evolution. They have been grouping criminal enterprises and terrorists wrongly as collusion simultaneously, not realizing with a breaching method that forced, checked, and persuaded humanity's names, A through Z, only operable by locations, areas, and states names, no, but to blame other things, others, or ourselves for what it caused and for what it keeps. It caused from off the campuses of the ancient republic for which we stand, and the exceptions that were not the campuses of the republic for which we stand, in the pantheism it was led by. But it was reliant upon them too, because pantheism is not about being led by a pantheism. It's about being led by the hyper invisible but still discernible, not leaving out the smallest finite detail, not leaving out the way it has relativity grouped. In other words, it's generating all group differences. And we can make systems tactical appreciates group differences, tactical from the complete way it is. Its way, some things are only criminal insidiousness natures are positive, like peace. There is a difference between criminal insidiousness natures of peace and hyper peace, for example. Nature shows us that to call it this, because nature shows us we are distinct from the other species bodies of individual. We're distinct. We're a distinct, different species bodies. A different species body from the other species bodies. And those individual distinct bodies different from themselves are made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. All group differences, for example. Nature communicates to us about difference. It shows us the difference of its body, inseparable from all other things, even if they're made up with its special hypervolume science, inseparable distinctly from the order of the finite, well, non-distinctly, but and from the active or grouped, and from what is simultaneous. Discern how we could only appreciate subjects individually, grouped, and simultaneously to an extent. And with a discernment of that appreciation of how it works, we could discern that and how there is also constantly what is greater than and more finite than that. Well, not as it, but as it anyway. And it is that same identity of value progression that is showing us that it's not our species body, is not the other species bodies, except for how it is all things anyway. He's showing us that here now many pray for natural reasons, but also now because also hyper additionally our campuses A through Z and the exceptions, not just homeschool. No matter what country we are in, A through Z already had locations, areas, and states. Self-value, not right where it's not self-value, but right where it's being used remotely. We can discern that's how it's part of it. You guys have self-valued roles, replacing what James Madison communicated to you. You have those self-valued roles, which are simultaneously right where we can discern the breaching method. Forgiveness is increasingly about this. It's about a whole bunch of things at once. It's also about, for example, how and why it is functional, where and how there is an identity of value progression that is hyper invisible but still discernible, distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. And English was revealed to be taught this way. Again, here many pray. But now, because there are distinctly impositions upon every individual voice. There are styles, plural, as collusions, as an array, as of only allowed to be heard voices, and or relative to where and to how we sense and discern people attacked unjustly. And what they're trying to say is change the faith. Like anyone, not for defense of white or black, but just for the defenses of the fact, treatment, nature, quality aspects of nature associated with leaving out how we have black people's whites of eyes, how there are principal treatments that are criminal insidious natures of principal treatments. They are not true always, unbreakable principal treatments, as these black people's whites of eyes. Even if we have no eyes, we lose our eyes. In other words, what I'm trying to say, it's not a point game like that. The point is that there are other species bodies with eyes, distinct from ourselves, from our own, but non-distinct and simultaneous, but prefer that further distinct identity of simultaneous nature that is inseparable from all things, except for its complete identity. Except for unless we use its system that connects with the rest of itself and reveals evolution's fruits and gifts, means out of nowhere here. And where we are fact treatment nature, how we are fact treatment nature. The whole species body doesn't understand clearer than day how and why we are needing to hunger and have jobs and contemplate through systems and as systems tactically ulterior from its own, while nuclear generation is needed. Peaceful nuclear generation causes impositions where they have to keep things getting cool. They have to keep putting water on it. But one thing happened with that. Oh, but we'll do this. What happened? No, but even a wave from the ocean took out Fukushima. And it was almost big problems. That wasn't even a war related. With Fukushima, and then a war was there. Anywhere the species body has a war, it's proofs. Worse than criminal incompetence. The suburbs were designed before America's founders were born for torture, extortion, and fact treatment nature, slavery. That's not even debatable. The only reason you guys get away with debating it, humanity, Americans, right through our courses, right through our schools, they are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, rock, collusions/S. And we understand this and we love our teachers. So we have forgiveness for them. And simultaneously, though, we have forgiveness for the kids. For example, the interbranch. American history and founding locations are all about how interbranch were timed collusions, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw, while pretending to be patriot natures, pretending to be capable of it. That's what we discern when we hear them speaking about the Civil War, replacing what James Madison communicated about it. We had declassified for us to understand. And about how Native Americans are our founders, the ones that agreed to be grouped with the colonists and to use that plan, but they had no means but to. They wanted slavery undone completely. They want the Constitution unabridged, and why and how we have rights are too numerous to list them. Free speech. They've been pretending the outcomes of cases means what it doesn't too, to cover up all kinds of methods to cover up that the breaching method showed them they could use. The breaching method showed them how to interpret the law and what's practical by the sciences, which include and built them out. The breaching method showed them how to do that. In other words, this would be instantly revealed if people would follow mandated law. Like when people speak about child abuse acts that are recorded, people change and fake what they say. The intelligence family jumps in dishonestly. And part of the way they get away with this is because of the method next to each of the campuses I went to. Increasingly, mayors from Wethersfield and from Connecticut and Cromwell mayors. There's one with the name Fianza, is involved with Fox Connecticut News with the FBI and other police forms, state police families, and people interstates, like Rhode Island too, with the military and Navy and state police. Overt criminal enterprises, plural, private ones. People with campuses putting predicate acts and facts in databases and having people, and these are from off campuses influenced while having been used remote, and having other people act tied to that. Whole careers are haven't been used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw. In other words, we are compromised at countries A through Z. Here, Anthony. In other words, so what we need to do, and what I'm doing is begging as a member of the human species body of individual bodies. I'll prove to you. I show you this. In other words, I shouldn't even do this my programming. The hyperintelligence already recorded, the artificial intelligence and readings of statutes and precedents behind it, collusion/S with many different distinct natures of organized crimes, and collusion/S too, with only natures of counters to types of things as collusions. Victims advocates have and have had collusions with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, even if they have roles directed to pretend they are that. They are involved through administrations too, since before the Clintons, but through the Clinton administration, involved with multiple military people, involved with predicate acts methods on all sides of my house, and with sense and sensibilities, pretending they can speak about morality or think, let alone for other people. They're forging names and switching names intercities with this too. Increasingly, their roles with their uses of their own differences, including their religions or other people's, little tricks to bring this up, and with how they have, I couldn't believe how since we were kids, since before that. In other words, the government is the one that's supposed to discern clearer than day. How a breaching method reassigned black-white made the positives with black and the negatives as collusions. The same thing against everyone labeled white, and the whole time everyone's measured and maintained, leaving out the breaching method against Native Americans. You can't tell American history properly. You can't communicate for James Madison properly if you don't begin with understanding the predicate acts and facts method against the Native Americans, sustained, and Native Americans founders were born. And so slavery was entrenched in northern colonies, southern colonies. So you guys need to understand the counter-extortion of George Washington. So you need to allow someone to speak about the extortion of George Washington. You guys won't even allow people to be honest about the extortion of George Washington, let alone his use of the plan of James Madison and of the founders behind him, who enabled leverage and means to counter-extort, force them to break the law syntactically at key locations inside of more than 13 colonies. Again, roles already, even with things like slavery, northern colonies and southern colonies. The differences of the guilt with the law, with that, the prisons tied to that, the state offices, or the equivalent, like the state corrections offices of Connecticut and the state judicial branch offices. And the difference of guilt there or next to it, it never stopped being collusion/S, including educators with remote uses of the black and of the white theme, sense and sensibilities, involve all kinds of medicines corruption and legal corruption, and criminally foreign influence rolls with a Victorian house on Two Route Highway and other houses on Two Route Highway involved with body dumping spots and whiting forensics with sexual and medical offenders of kids, and the mayors involved and their family members and people with the state judicial branch offices increasingly involved with Two Route Highway where it runs into Hangdog Lane and conjunctions to it. Paul Zane, Ray Collusions, and Tim O'Brien and other people have Russians involved with corners of streets on Highcrest Street, involved with proven child abusers, leaders of kids. And they have rules of more of them with a principal forced ones years apart who were first forced. They also have rules with more sexual and medical offenders of kids involved with New Britain Superior Court at the same time with this. And one's named Leahy. And they also faked conversations with me. Also with doctors tied to an Anthony Yagman, who's also with the Leahy family, and people named Lombardo involved on all, and people named people have been planting evidences on all sides of campuses. Some people I don't even know their names. They just time where you're going to be there and walk and make a picture, make it look like they know you. There are proofs that they've been doing that too. With Kevin Harris is involved with polling locations, and the universities use criminally foreign influence interstate with child abusers, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and people involved with medical corruption and putting fake things in databases. I never had a word of conversation with a Kevin Harris. His mother is increasingly involved with child abusers and people on Valleycrest Street. And where I went to a kindergarten for 1 year. One of the people involved with that name, Harris, is also involved with papers with that. And but they're faking and changing and putting multiple, like these are people also involved with all kinds of falsified police reports and courts collusions with crime scenes with other countries and with foreign and domestic military in the campuses. So since founding, we had obligations to demonstrate how witch trials, we're supposed to ask ourselves what that's about, even if it was completely made up. And we're supposed to use how we know that there were the crazy laws against everyone entrenched, even against our black pupils, whites of eyes, entrenched, and rolls with it by a breaching method were monitored and maintained, not just through international monitored conversations, not just through the countries that were rolls with that, only allowed to have restriction conversations and backgrounds. So we're going to have to pull part of the impositions upon countries A through Z to the surface here. And like upon Iran. And in other words, we can make a way so people can make energy and that they would agree. It'd be like a hyper defense weapon system. I mean, a hyper peace defense system. Because if we have hyper peace, that's one of the best ways to have, it's the best way to have defense. And we're all on the same page as a human species body of individual bodies. We have to begin somewhere. And two at the same time. Like, for example, we should take any counters, anyone who disagrees with it, and Ibrahim Traore, because at least he's trying passionately to care and keep it real. But while he's trying to entertain campuses, those campuses are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, incapable of speaking for principles and have been incapable of speaking for principles properly. Otherwise, they would not have had black people's whites of eyes left out. Otherwise, they would not have had the black-white collusions, the international voices, and with the smart asses with the pens and the definitions of everything. The counters to everything with types of counters to types of problems as collusion/S. Psychiatry is criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw black pupils. Peer, all see the whites of eyes, all rise. So in other words, Iran would agree too. Everyone's lying about religion. Because the campuses are at countries A through Z. The exceptions are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Beginning of the Quran says, all that matters is if someone's going to be honest about their use of the name for all of space/existence, per my transliteration of an English transliteration. In other words, and it says that's all that matters. If they're honest about that, in other words, and this is critical because there's a hyper criminal enterprise method that forbids us from appreciating what nature communicates in some ancient times, right? And the difference of our all locations /s, but then further with the names of the people of the sciences have been stayed collusion /s with this. Forgiveness is to not make the law being about guilt, leaving out the breaching method, or leaving out how, why. It is functional by nature itself, being hyper invisible, but distinctly from how it is invisible, but still discernible. There are sequence shifts in our whole predicate acts methods, like pretending not to real understand people, chilling effects, or take your meds. When I'm talking about World Trade Center predicate acts, Harvard Hospital has doctors that fake conversations with me. They have all kinds of predicate acts, wire crime, mail crime. They won't communicate with me too. They won't communicate with me with mail wire, but they'll pretend to others through the mail and wire. They'll change and fake what's there. Facebook page of Harvard Hospital is involved with organized crimes. I'm not trying to hurt a hospital. You guys better respond, or that's where you're guilty too, hiding them. A Leahy family, get me off the fake conversations with them. A Judge Killian has a bunch of people involved with the sexual and medical offenders of kids. Dear God, make him dead on paper. Harvard Hospital. Get them off. What are they doing with the military and with this Dr. Shu with modern languages and his neighbors? Increasingly involved with people like Turrell Highway, Hangdog Lane. Why does he repeat confessions about that and his roles with the Elm Streets and Rocky Hill and Weathersfield? And increasingly the people on my street from other areas with the untimely death at Trinity College and this Robert Rodriguez on my street with another one. And fake ties to me. So that's why I didn't respond to them on my street. I had my confirmed it on Facebook. They recorded them lying about themselves and what they think about people and what they say on Facebook. And they brought it up. They're the ones that forced me to go on there. In other words, I've been asking you guys since before Facebook was up there to get me a response for the World Trade Center attack predicate acts, which became that before the World Trade Center attack. People involved with all those countries and with the sides of the building too, the same ones involved with the sides as countries, and they exploited that way. Man, you pray. These are still people with the religious spots too. Bunch of fakes with passions and emotions interbranch. Oh, we were just reading what other people said. It's all fake. Get them on paper, one name in sequence. They want to pretend passions and emotions. Fix the fake news. And Facebook knows that they have collusions with FBI, Marines, Air Force, New Britain Superior Court, Weathersfield Pizza. I mean, I don't know if they're on Facebook. Weathersfield Police. Weathersfield Pizza has the judicial branch offices involved with a lot of people tied to a Casper family too. I don't know them, and a Pandolf family. Has wire crime acts and methods, all sides of criminal and civil cases, in the courts, in the state judicial branch offices, and the corrections offices, and conjunctions into that, all along Route 175, and people with corners of the streets on it are collusion /s with them, with their educators, in all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the courts' names, their family members. At the same time, with a whole bunch of different countries and people involved with the World Trade Center attack. A bunch of people with Glastonbury tied to Central Connecticut State University, educators involved with the intelligence community, currently tied to a Mike Pandolf too. I never met his family. I only know him seeking me out as a stranger, make confession demonstrations, including his roles with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and with the lawyers, the people at the crime scenes. On the side of Weathersfield High School, On the sides of it, they've been planting evidences with all sides of criminal civil cases with courts and people with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices. Has something to do with their roles also with all along Park Street in Hartford, Connecticut, and with names next to Hartford Hospital, and a line from there to UPS. A bunch of people through UPS through time are involved with other shipping locations too. People with Coca-Cola, they used to work for Coca-Cola. People they used to work for the post office, involved, with the fire departments, the campuses of them, all kinds of intelligence, corruption, identity theft, fraud, slanders. Get the Dollar Fair family that sought me out too as strangers. I'm lucky I even know their names. I never saw them at campuses. They're involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, planting evidences with intelligence families near me. And I never saw them in my area. Let's get them on paper, please. I forgot what I titled this. Oh, Megyn Kelly. So the Britain Superior Court has roles with a bunch of people from Wethersfield with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices who have also been planting evidences on all sides of campuses and into the databases at campuses, including with proven child abusers, leaders of kids first forced and years apart, and ones involved with all kinds of other natures of organized crimes with that in the past and now at the same time, different types of crimes, and prosecutors and judges' kids and foreign and domestic medical families at the same time, and victims advocates timed collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and people pretending to be against things who are collusion/s. Also, within as they have tied their roles with the state capitol and the names next to it are involved with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, acting so other people could take pictures as their roles with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the court's names their family members, and the news at the same time. And even when they're not in the cases, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists roles too, with all names on all sides of on the sides of the World Trade Center towers, including a court next to it, is involved with the court itself. And people on all sides of that forced to collusions interstates with Central Connecticut State University names and names on and the difference of the guilt there are on the side of it. It's also directors that are interstates, like I believe California might be a Hollywood, involved in people that work for them, involved with Covington Street, also with military, involved with the FBI before and after the World Trade Center attack. Also, since I was a kid, people on Covington Street have collusion/s with a bunch of people throughout Wethersfield who had been planting evidences on my street, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, and sequence shifts, all kinds of federal evidences, crimes with the same house about with what would take. They took a shot at me right before the president was shot on with the reporting by CNN. These are also people with next to CNN, next to Central Connecticut State University and Paul Manafort Drive. They also have people with Russia and Ukraine involved, also with Hartford Hospital, with a bunch of people like Mark Violet, and involved also with Griswold Street confessions, and people with the shipping locations, and FBI involved with them, and all along Ridge Road, and their roles with and Route 3 and Route 175, planting evidences, fake ties, fake nature ties to me, and with the news, and their educators. I never had class with the Violets and a Kolvinskis. I never met his brother. The brother of a Justin Kolvinskis, and a Justin Kolvinskis is reportedly and recorded one of the ones involved at Trinity College with a Joshua Stryker, who has been putting fake things in databases with others behind my back, people I never had classes with. And they've been doing this intercities with the campuses I went to behind my back, weren't even my grade. And they try to take a picture to make it look like I know him, or I ever saw him around campus. I never did. Never had a word of conversation with him. He has something to do with UPS too. He's one of the ones seeking me out with other people making confessions for him. He has all kinds of organized crimes with UPS roles since I was a kid with the state judicial branch officers increasingly involved at other locations, planting evidences and collusions with all natures of crime scenes and the names next to them, including body dumping spots that were brought up at the same time, and murders, like the murder of Greg Kyler, even if that was made up. A bunch of people were tied to it at the time, with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members, also involved with all kinds of organized crimes, acts, and methods at Central Connecticut State University, with the ones at Trinity College too. Also with criminal enterprises and private ones next to the campuses, involved with involved with identity theft, fraud, things. Also with the news, Afghan leaders and kids. There's an Officer Hunter too, involved with Central Connecticut State University, and with Harper Courts, with the FBI, and foreign and domestic military before and after the World Trade Center attack, refusing to identify themselves legitimately, and as ones who were planting chilling effects on people involved with Connecticut boxing gyms. And they've been threatening, torturing, hurting me not to say anything, what I caught them doing before the World Trade Center attack and after the World Trade Center attack, as ones involved at the World Trade Center and spots next to it, including the court next to it, right before the World Trade Center attack. And you guys are letting the news, the fake conversations with me about that after the World Trade Center attack too. WFSB, that also instantly recorded their collusions with the people involved before it too. So WFSB is making all kinds of demonstrations to me, and already communicated other than they could afford to have a demonstrator. That's why they had to fake conversations with me. They fake what they said and what others say. They just completely fake it. And they fake what they communicate. And they can't afford to have discerns where others communicate. And the difference of guilt of them, their sources, same thing with WTNH, has sources all along Route 175 involved with corners of streets, also with people at corners of streets like Highcrest Street with the Principal Upskirt Natures campus, that Principal Child Abusers campus I caught with worse, first being forced, has something to do with their roles with Russians since I was a kid, and people with mayors involved and other ages and natures of politicians. Let's get them on paper, one name and sequence, please. Lisa of ID.